Before the first flake fell, frontier families knew what was coming. The sky would bruise purple at the horizon, the wind would drop to an eerie stillness, and then, without mercy, the blizzard would arrive. For children, growing up on the American and Canadian frontier in the 18th and 19th centuries, winter was not a season to be admired through glass. It was an adversary, a weeks-long siege that tested every calorie stored, every strip of meat dried, and every jar of fat rendered in the warm months before. What kept these children alive was not luck. It was a deeply practical, almost ruthless understanding of how the human body burns fuel in the cold, and the forgotten wisdom of building a diet engineered entirely for survival. These frontier families had no nutritionists, no caloric charts, no medical journals, and yet they understood something that modern sports scientists spend careers studying. In extreme cold, the body becomes a furnace, and that furnace demands fat and protein above all else. Carbohydrates burn fast and bright, like dry kindling. Fat and protein burn slow and deep, like a hardwood log banked against a winter night. Frontier mothers and fathers, drawing on generations of indigenous knowledge and hard-won personal experience, built their children's winter diets around this principle with extraordinary precision. The result was a food culture that was unglamorous, intensely functional, and, in the most literal sense, life-saving. Nothing embodied this dietary philosophy more completely than pemmican. Originating with the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains and adopted wholesale by fur traders, mountain men, and frontier settlers, pemmican was caloric engineering at its most elegant. Dried venison, moose, or beef was pounded to a fine powder, then folded into rendered fat, usually beef tallow or suet, at a near equal ratio by weight. When dried berries were available, they were pressed in for a small measure of sweetness and, crucially, a trace of vitamin C to guard against scurvy during months without fresh produce. The result was a dense, dark cake that could last weeks in cold conditions, required no fire to eat, and delivered an extraordinary density of energy in every bite. A child given a portion of pemmican before heading out to tend to animals in a blizzard was a child whose body had hours of sustained heat to draw on. Yet pemmican was rarely the whole story. When the family was sheltered inside and the fire was burning, frontier cooking expanded into something that was almost comforting. The iron pot that hung over nearly every frontier hearth became the center of winter survival. Into it went dried beans, lentils, or split peas, pulled from the cellar stores, crumbled pemmican or strips of rehydrated jerky, and whatever root vegetables had been carefully packed into the root cellar in autumn, potatoes, turnips, and carrots that held their nutrition through months of cold storage. The resulting stew was thick, warming, and deliberately constructed to deliver both the slow-burning protein-fat combination from the meat and the complex carbohydrates from legumes and roots. It was not gourmet, but on a day when the wind was driving snow horizontally across the prairie and the temperature had dropped below zero, it was everything. What strikes the modern survivalist and bushcraft student most forcefully about this diet is not any single food, it is the system. Every element was chosen, stored, and prepared as part of an integrated strategy for keeping bodies functional under extreme physiological stress. These frontier families understood in their bones that survival is not reactive. It is built in advance in the warm months through discipline and foresight. The pemmican made in October was the child alive in February. That lesson, Prepare before the storm, not during it, is perhaps the most enduring piece of fieldcraft wisdom this era has to offer. In a world where preparedness culture is growing and more people are turning to bushcraft, traditional skills and self-reliance, the frontier winter diet is not a relic, it is a blueprint, it is a reminder that the gap between life and death in a true survival situation is often filled not by courage or technology, but by knowledge, by understanding what the human body needs and having the discipline to provide it. Subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles. If this episode lit something in you that pulled toward history, toward self-reliance, toward the deep satisfaction of genuinely useful knowledge, then you're exactly who Fieldcraft Chronicles was built for. Subscribe now so you never miss an episode, and share this video with the history lovers, bushcraft enthusiasts, and preparedness-minded people in your life. Every share helps keep this kind of cinematic, deeply researched content alive. The frontier asked everything of the people who lived it. The least we can do is remember what they knew. Stay prepared. Stay curious. This is Fieldcraft Chronicles.